The Grand Lecture Hall of Cryanar University stood as a testament to the architectural prowess of its creators. Soaring crystalline arches supported a transparent dome ceiling that revealed the twin moons hanging in the lavender sky. The auditorium could seat 500 students, arranged in concentric semicircles that descended toward a central platform where Professor Salahir organized his notes for the day's lecture. Salahir belonged to the blue caste, evident from the subtle azure tint to his otherwise translucent skin. Like all blues, his enlarged cranium housed an expanded cerebral cortex, allowing for exceptional analytical capabilities and information processing. His six-fingered hands moved with deliberate precision as he arranged his teaching materials on the hovering podium. Students filed into the lecture hall, their bodies naturally segregating by caste. The Reds sat closest to the exits, their muscular frames and reinforced skeletal structures making them appear more solid than their peers. Their reddish hue came from the higher concentration of specialized oxygen-carrying cells in their blood, an adaptation that allowed for remarkable strength and stamina. Among them, Zahir stood out with his particularly vibrant coloration, a sign of genetic purity within his caste. The yellows occupied the middle sections, their slender bodies moving with graceful coordination. Their golden-tinged skin covered enhanced neural systems, specialized for empathic connections and social intelligence. They possessed an uncanny ability to read micro-expressions and body language, making them natural diplomats and mediators in Cryanar society. Mihara, a yellow of exceptional talent, had already established herself as the social hub of the class, connecting students across different study groups with effortless charm. Finally, the blues claimed the front rows, their translucent bodies revealing the complex networks of neural pathways that gave them their intellectual edge. They were the thinkers, the planners, the architects of Cryanar's technological marvels. Uhari, a blue with particularly developed temporal lobes, had already published 3 papers in prestigious journals, despite being only in his second year of university. Professor Salahir observed the familiar self-sorting with a mixture of resignation and anticipation. Today's lecture would challenge these divisions in ways his students couldn't anticipate. "Attention, please." Salahir's voice resonated through the hall, enhanced by the room's natural acoustics. The murmur of conversations gradually faded to silence. Today, we begin our exploration of xenobiology with a focus on a species that has recently generated significant controversy in the Galactic Council. He gestured toward the holographic projector, which illuminated with an image of a bipedal creature with minimal body hair, standing upright with limbs that appeared strangely simple compared to the multi-jointed appendages of the Cryanarians. "Humans," Salahir announced, letting the word hang in the air. "Native to a planet called Earth in the Sol system, approximately 2,147 light-years from our own. A relatively young species by galactic standards, yet one that has advanced with remarkable speed from primitive tool use to interstellar travel in less than 10,000 years." The hologram rotated, showing the human form from different angles. Several students leaned forward with scientific curiosity, while others recoiled slightly at the alien appearance. "What makes this species particularly noteworthy?" Salahir continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "Is that last orbital cycle. The Galactic Council officially classified human biology as a weapon." A ripple of surprise moved through the audience. Uhari's hand shot up immediately. "Yes, Uhari?" "Professor, on what grounds was this classification made? Weapons classifications are typically reserved for engineered biological systems or species with naturally occurring toxins or pathogens. Humans appear to possess neither." "An excellent question," Salahir nodded approvingly, "and one that has sparked considerable debate among xenobiologists throughout the galaxy. The classification was not based on any single biological feature, but rather on the unique combination of traits that, according to the Council, constitutes an inherent danger when introduced to new environments or civilizations. Zahir, the red student, scoffed audibly. His powerful voice carried across the hall without amplification. With respect, Professor, they look fragile. Single heart, no exoskeleton, limited musculature. What possible threat could they pose to advanced species like ours? Salahir smiled, having anticipated this reaction. Perhaps you would like to elaborate on your assessment, Zahir, since you represent the Red Caste. Tell us why you believe humans pose no physical threat. Zahir rose to his full height, towering nearly 3 meters tall. His reinforced skeletal structure and dense musculature gave him a commanding presence. Gladly. Professor, based on the morphological data displayed, the average human possesses approximately 1/4 the strength of even our weakest reds. Their skin provides minimal protection against trauma or environmental hazards. They lack redundant organ systems, making them vulnerable to single-point failures. Their sensory capabilities appear rudimentary at best. From a purely physical standpoint, they would be at a severe disadvantage in any confrontation with crionarians. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the red section of the audience. Even some yellows nodded in acknowledgement of the apparent physical disparities. A compelling analysis, Salahir conceded. Now, Mihara, as our representative from the Yellow Caste, what are your thoughts on humans from a social and empathic perspective? Mihara stood with fluid grace, her golden skin catching the light from the ceiling dome. The available data suggests humans possess only rudimentary empathic abilities. Professor, they rely primarily on verbal communication, supplemented by crude body language. Their social structures appear chaotic and inconsistent, with constant conflict between different groups. They lack the unified neural resonance that allows for true empathic harmony. From a yellow perspective, their social capabilities seem primitive and potentially dangerous due to their unpredictability. More murmurs filled the hall, now with a hint of superiority. Salahir waited for them to subside before addressing his final student representative. And Uhari, your assessment from a blue perspective? The slender blue rose slowly, his enlarged cranium housing one of the most promising minds of his generation. Their neural architecture is simplistic, Professor. Single hemisphere dominance, limited parallel processing capabilities, and relatively few neural connections compared to our species. While they show some capacity for abstract thought, their cognitive abilities appear to be severely constrained by their biology. I find it difficult to understand how such minds could pose an intellectual threat to more advanced species. Professor Salahir nodded, looking pleased with these assessments. He allowed a moment of silence to fill the hall before speaking again, his voice now carrying a hint of challenge. So we have 3 expert opinions from our 3 castes, all concluding that humans are inferior to crionarians in every meaningful way. He paused, his expression shifting to one of intensity. And yet, the Galactic Council, comprised of the 12 most advanced civilizations in our sector, has unanimously classified human biology as a weapon. How do we reconcile these contradictory assessments? The lecture hall fell silent as students grappled with the paradox. Today, Salahir continued, we will examine the unique biological adaptations that led to this classification. But more importantly, we will challenge our own assumptions about what constitutes biological advantage. I warn you now, this lecture may fundamentally alter how you perceive your place in the galactic order. He tapped the podium controls, and the human hologram was replaced by a detailed anatomical cross-section. Let us begin with what appears to be a severe disadvantage, the human endocrine system. The image zoomed in on the adrenal glands. Humans possess a fight-or-flight response mediated primarily by compounds called adrenaline and noradrenaline. When activated, this system produces effects that seem rather unremarkable by our standards. Increased heart rate, Elevated blood pressure? Dilated airways? Zahir interrupted, unable to contain himself. Professor, these are basic stress responses common to thousands of species. How does this qualify as a weapon? Salahir fixed his gaze on the red student. An understandable reaction, Zahir. But consider this. Under extreme stress, this simple system allows humans to temporarily exceed their physical limitations to a degree unmatched by any other known species. He projected a new series of images, historical records from Earth, showing humans performing seemingly impossible feats of strength. These are not genetically enhanced individuals or members of a warrior caste. These are ordinary humans who, when sufficiently stressed, lifted vehicles weighing over 2 tons, broke through reinforced barriers, and survived conditions that should have been fatal. The phenomenon is so common on Earth that they have a name for it: hysterical strength. Zahir's expression shifted from dismissal to skepticism. Surely these are exaggerations or statistical outliers. They are not, Salahir replied firmly. And more remarkably, humans can intentionally activate parts of this response through mental discipline alone. Their warriors can enter controlled states that allow them to ignore pain, operate despite severe injuries, and perform beyond their normal physical parameters. He turned to address the entire class. Unlike our red caste, whose strength is constant and predictable, human capabilities exist on a spectrum that changes based on circumstance. This unpredictability is one factor that concerned the Galactic Council. Salahir moved on to the next image, showing the human brain. Now, let us address Mihara's assessment of human social capabilities. Mihara straightened in her seat, ready to defend her analysis. Humans lack our neural resonance capabilities, Salahir acknowledged. They cannot directly sense each other's emotional states, as yellows can. This appears to be a severe limitation. However, humans have evolved a different form of social bonding that the Council found particularly concerning. The hologram shifted to show humans in various groupings: families, communities, working teams. Humans form what they call pack bonds, emotional attachments that can develop with remarkable speed and intensity. Unlike our carefully calibrated social hierarchies, human bonds can form across arbitrary boundaries and with minimal biological justification. Mihara frowned. Professor, many species form social groups. How is this noteworthy? Because, Mihara, humans can form these bonds with virtually any entity capable of interaction. The hologram changed to show humans with various non-human creatures. They form pack bonds with other species on their planet. They form bonds with artificial intelligences. There are documented cases of humans risking their lives for entities with whom they have interacted for less than one standard day. The yellow students shifted uncomfortably as the implications became clear. While your caste specializes in understanding and managing the emotions of others, humans specialize in something far more unpredictable. They inspire loyalty and cooperation across species boundaries. The Council noted that in every first contact scenario involving humans, they rapidly established alliances with previously unaffiliated species. Salahir allowed this to sink in before turning to address Uhari and the blue section. Finally, let us consider the human mind. Uhari correctly noted that human neural architecture is less complex than ours. Their brains have fewer neural connections, limited parallel processing, and smaller storage capacity. Uhari nodded, confident in his assessment. However, Salahir continued, humans possess 2 cognitive advantages that the Council found deeply concerning. The hologram shifted to show brain scans with certain regions highlighted. First, humans exhibit extreme cognitive specialization. While the average human may indeed have limited intellectual capabilities compared to a blue, specialized humans, what they call savants, or geniuses, can outperform even our most advanced cognitive systems in specific domains. The hologram displayed historical figures from Earth: Einstein, Turing, von Neumann, Ramanujan, alongside excerpts of their work. These individuals developed theories and solved problems that remained beyond the reach of our best minds for centuries. And they did so with brains that, by our standards, should have been incapable of such insights. Uhari's expression had transformed from confidence to consternation. But these must be genetic anomalies, Professor, rare mutations. That brings me to their second advantage, Salahir replied. Human intelligence is not compartmentalized as ours is. Their cognitive processes integrate emotional responses, physical states, and abstract reasoning in ways our specialized castes cannot replicate. The hologram showed a complex network of interconnections between different brain regions. A human can simultaneously draw on physical experience, emotional intuition, and logical reasoning to solve problems. They call this creativity, or intuitive leaps, the ability to connect seemingly unrelated concepts in novel ways. This integrative cognition allows them to adapt their thinking to new challenges with remarkable speed. The lecture hall had grown silent as students from all three castes contemplated these revelations. The neat divisions of their society, physical prowess to the reds, social harmony to the yellows, intellectual advancement to the blues, were being challenged by a species that somehow integrated all three domains. Salahir paused, observing the impact of his words. Then, he delivered the final blow to their assumptions. But none of these traits alone would have led to the weapon classification. The true concern of the Galactic Council lies in two additional biological adaptations that make humans uniquely dangerous: their unparalleled endurance and their nutritional flexibility. The hologram shifted to show human hunters on the ancient plains of Earth. Humans evolved as persistence hunters. While they cannot match the speed or strength of many prey species, they possess the ability to maintain moderate physical activity for extraordinary periods. Long after other predators would abandon the chase due to exhaustion, humans continue. They can pursue prey for days without rest, maintaining cognitive function throughout. The image changed to show humans running what appeared to be extreme endurance races across hostile terrain. For recreation, humans voluntarily run distances that would exhaust even our red caste. They derive satisfaction from pushing their physiological limits. The Council noted with alarm that human exploration teams consistently outperformed all other species in extended missions, simply because they did not require rest or recovery at the same intervals. Zahir had fallen silent, his earlier confidence visibly shaken. But perhaps most concerning to the Council was this. The hologram showed humans consuming an astonishing variety of foods. Humans can derive nutrition from nearly any organic matter. Their digestive systems can process substances toxic to most other species. They intentionally consume fermented foods, bacteria-laden products, and even materials containing mild toxins for pleasure. The students watched with a mixture of fascination and revulsion as the hologram displayed humans eating everything from raw animal flesh to highly processed synthetic compounds. This nutritional flexibility means humans can survive in environments where other species would starve. They can establish colonies on worlds considered uninhabitable by our standards. And most concerning to the Council, Salahir paused, ensuring he had everyone's attention. Humans can survive by consuming the biological materials of almost any other species if necessary. A collective shudder passed through the lecture hall. The Council's classification was not based on malicious intent, Salahir clarified, but on capacity and adaptability. Humans combine unpredictable strength, cross-species social bonding, integrative problem-solving, unmatched endurance, and universal nutritional capabilities. They can survive where others perish, adapt where others fail, and form alliances where others remain isolated. He deactivated the hologram, allowing his students to absorb the implications. The question before us is not whether humans are superior or inferior to cryonarians. The question is whether their unique biology represents a threat or an opportunity for galactic civilization. For several moments, the lecture hall remained silent. Then Zahir rose again, his earlier certainty replaced by thoughtful consideration. Professor, you've demonstrated that humans possess physical adaptations our caste lacks. But does this not suggest a potential for collaboration rather than conflict? The red caste could learn from human endurance techniques while offering our superior strength in partnership. Before Salahir could respond, Mihara stood as well. I see similar potential from a yellow perspective. If humans can form social bonds across species boundaries with such ease, they could serve as intermediaries in diplomatic situations where empathic resonance fails. Our understanding of emotional nuance combined with their ability to inspire cross-species loyalty could be powerful. Uhari joined his classmates, his enlarged cranium tilted in a gesture of contemplation. And from a blue perspective, studying their integrative cognition could lead to breakthroughs in our own intellectual development. The compartmentalization of our intelligence has advantages, but has perhaps limited our creative potential. Professor Salahir looked at his three student representatives with profound satisfaction. You begin to see why I find the study of human biology so compelling. The Galactic Council's classification focused on potential threats, but visionaries across the galaxy see different possibilities. A future where the specialized advantages of species like ours combine with the adaptable integration of species like humans. He gestured toward the now empty space where the hologram had been. The most remarkable weapon in the human arsenal is not their strength, their social bonding, or their intelligence. It is their adaptability, their capacity to take the best traits of other species and incorporate them into their civilization without losing their essential nature. The bell chimed, signaling the end of the lecture period, but none of the students moved to leave. For your next assignment, Salahir said into the expectant silence, I want each of you to research one aspect of human biology that complements your caste specialization. Consider how that trait might enhance rather than threaten our civilization. We will discuss your findings in our next session. As the students finally began to gather their materials and file out of the hall, Salahir noticed that the usual caste segregation had subtly changed. Reds, yellows, and blues were mingling, engaged in animated discussion across traditional boundaries. He smiled to himself, satisfied that the first step toward a new understanding had been taken. The lecture hall emptied, leaving Professor Salahir alone with his thoughts. The twin moons of Krianar had shifted position in the sky visible through the dome ceiling, casting new patterns of light across the floor. He gathered his teaching materials, reflecting on the session. The classification of human biology as a weapon had sent shockwaves through the academic community when it was first announced. Many of his colleagues had reacted with alarm, advocating for strict quarantine protocols and limited contact. But Salahir had seen something different in the Council's detailed analysis. Not just the potential for destruction, but the potential for unprecedented growth and cooperation. His reverie was interrupted by movement at the entrance to the hall. Zahir, Mihara, and Uhari had returned, approaching his podium together, an unusual sight in itself, as students of different castes rarely formed social groups outside of structured academic activities. Professor, Zahir began, his powerful voice now modulated to a respectful tone. We've been discussing your lecture and have some additional questions. If you have time. Salahir gestured for them to continue, intrigued by this spontaneous cross-caste initiative. You mentioned human adaptability, Mihara said, but didn't fully explore its implications. If humans can integrate so effectively with other species, wouldn't that make them ideal intermediaries in galactic affairs rather than threats? Uhari nodded in agreement. And their capacity to thrive in diverse environments suggests they could pioneer colonization of worlds currently considered uninhabitable, expanding the habitable zone of our galaxy. Salahir considered his response carefully. The Council's classification was not incorrect, merely incomplete. A weapon, after all, is simply a tool with the potential for harm. But tools can be used constructively as well as destructively. He activated the podium again, bringing up a new hologram, a galactic map showing current civilizations and potential expansion zones. Consider our own history, he continued. The three castes of Cryonar evolved as separate subspecies, adapted to different ecological niches on our world. Our ancestors could have engaged in competition and conflict, leading to the extinction of one or more castes. Instead, they recognized the advantages of specialization and cooperation. The hologram shifted to show the early history of Cryonar, the formation of the first mixed communities, the development of complementary social roles, the eventual unification that led to their current civilization. Humans represent something new in galactic evolution, a species that specializes in not specializing, where we developed distinct castes with clear advantages in specific domains. Humans developed the capacity to perform adequately across all domains while maintaining the flexibility to adapt to new challenges. Zahir frowned, processing this perspective. But doesn't that make them inherently unstable? Without the clear social structure provided by our caste system, how do they maintain order and progress? Through constant change, Salahir replied. Human history is a sequence of social experiments, each building on the successes and failures of previous generations. They try new forms of organization, discard what doesn't work, and preserve what does. It's chaotic by our standards, but remarkably resilient. Mihara's expression reflected the empathic insight characteristic of her caste. You believe the Council's classification was motivated by fear of this chaos, don't you? Not just the physical or cognitive capabilities of humans, but the unpredictability they represent. Salahir nodded, impressed by her perception. The established civilizations of our galaxy have achieved stability through specialization and predictability. Humans represent a different evolutionary strategy, one that thrives on adaptation rather than optimization. Uhari's enlarged cranium pulsed slightly, with increased neural activity, a sign of intense cognitive engagement among blues. Then the logical approach would be controlled integration rather than isolation. Study their adaptability while introducing them gradually to galactic society. Precisely, Salahir confirmed. And that brings us to the true purpose of my lecture series. The Council's classification has initiated a galactic debate about human interaction. As future leaders in your respective castes, your understanding of human biology will shape Cryonar's position in that debate. The three students exchanged glances, suddenly aware of the larger implications of their studies. For our next session, Salahir continued, I'd like each of you to prepare a more detailed analysis. Zahir, explore how human endurance capabilities might complement red strength in joint operations. Mihara, investigate how human pack bonding could enhance yellow diplomatic initiatives. Uhari, examine how human integrative cognition might advance blue research methodologies. As the students nodded in agreement, Salahir felt a surge of optimism. The future of galactic civilization would depend on finding the right balance between the specialized excellence of species, like the Cryonarians, and the adaptive flexibility of humans. His students' willingness to look beyond traditional boundaries suggested that future might be brighter than the Council's cautious classification implied. The next day, the lecture hall was filled to capacity. Word had spread about Professor Salahir's controversial approach to human biology, attracting students from other departments and even a few faculty members curious about the discussion. Salahir began without preamble, activating the holographic projector to display a compilation of human physical achievements, from ancient warriors in battle to modern athletes performing seemingly impossible feats. Yesterday, we established the basic premise that human biology combines traits in ways that the Galactic Council deemed potentially dangerous. Today, we will examine these traits in greater detail, beginning with what appears to be a significant disadvantage, the human musculoskeletal system. The hologram zoomed in on human muscle fibers and bone structure. By any objective measure, human physical capabilities are inferior to our red cast. Their muscles generate approximately 1/4 the force per unit mass. Their bones, while surprisingly resilient, lack the crystalline reinforcement that gives cryonarian reds their exceptional durability. Zahir nodded, clearly pleased to have his original assessment validated. However, Salahir continued, human muscles possess unique properties that compensate for these limitations. First, they operate with remarkable efficiency over extended periods. While a red can generate explosive force far beyond human capacity, that same red would struggle to maintain even moderate exertion for the durations humans consider routine. The hologram shifted to show humans engaging in various endurance activities, running marathons, swimming vast distances, cycling for days on end. Second, human muscles adapt rapidly to changing demands. When subjected to consistent stress, human muscle tissue reconfigures itself to better meet that specific challenge. This adaptation occurs not just during developmental phases, but throughout their lives. Zahir raised his hand. Professor, are you suggesting that humans could eventually match red capabilities through adaptation? No, Salahir replied. The biological limits of human strength remain well below red potential. What I'm illustrating is that humans optimize for versatility rather than specialization. A red trained from birth for a specific physical task will always outperform a human in that narrow domain. But that same red would struggle to quickly adapt to a novel physical challenge, while humans excel at transferring physical skills to new contexts. He brought up new data showing the wide range of environments humans had successfully colonized on their home planet before achieving space travel. From Arctic tundra to equatorial jungles, from high-altitude mountains to oceanic islands, humans established sustainable communities. No other known species has demonstrated this range of environmental adaptation without technological assistance. A red student from the back of the hall called out, "But surely their technology was the key factor, not their biology." An excellent point, Salahir acknowledged. But consider this. Human technology itself is an extension of their biological adaptability. Unlike specialized species that develop technologies to compensate for fixed biological limitations, humans create technologies that amplify their adaptive potential. The hologram displayed the rapid evolution of human tools from simple stone implements to complex machines. Where our civilization developed technologies specific to each caste's specialization, humans developed general-purpose technologies that could be rapidly modified for new applications. This technological adaptability mirrors their biological adaptability. Salahir shifted focus, bringing up a new set of images showing human social structures, families, communities, nations, and global networks. Now, let us address the social dimensions that concern the Council. Mihara, you noted yesterday that humans lack the empathic resonance capabilities of our yellow caste. How would you assess their social cohesion given this limitation? Mihara stood, having clearly prepared for this question after yesterday's discussion. My further research suggests that humans compensate for their limited empathic abilities through extraordinary communication complexity. Professor, their languages contain subtle mechanisms for conveying emotional states that go far beyond mere information exchange. She gestured to the hologram, which Salahir adjusted to display examples of human literature, poetry, and art. These are not merely aesthetic productions, but sophisticated tools for generating shared emotional experiences across individuals who cannot directly sense each other's mental states. Where yellows achieve harmony through neural resonance, humans achieve it through cultural resonance, creating shared symbols, narratives, and values that bind individuals together despite their empathic limitations. Salahir nodded approvingly. An insightful analysis. The Council noted this aspect of human biology with particular concern. Without the biological constraints of empathic resonance, human social bonds can form and dissolve in patterns that appear chaotic by our standards. They can maintain loyalty to abstract concepts that transcend immediate social connections. The hologram shifted to show humans engaged in various forms of self-sacrifice for non-kin groups: soldiers defending their nations, activists championing causes, scientists dedicating their lives to abstract knowledge. This capacity for abstract loyalty allows humans to coordinate in larger groups than empathic species typically manage. While yellow empathic abilities diminish with distance and numbers, human cultural cohesion can unite millions who have never met face to face. Mihara considered this thoughtfully. But wouldn't such abstract bonds be weaker than our direct empathic connections? In some ways, yes, Salahir conceded. Human history is filled with social fractures and conflicts that would be nearly impossible in a species with true empathic resonance. But these same abstract bonds allow for a form of social evolution that our more stable systems lack. He displayed a timeline of human social organizations, from small tribal groups to global governance structures. When human social systems fail, they don't merely collapse, they transform. New organizational principles emerge from the failure of old ones. This social adaptability parallels their biological adaptability and technological adaptability. A yellow student near Mihara raised her hand. Professor, you keep emphasizing adaptability as if it were inherently superior to specialization. But our civilization has achieved greater technological advancement and social harmony through specialization. Isn't the human approach simply less efficient? Efficiency and adaptability represent different evolutionary strategies. Salahir replied, neither is inherently superior. In stable environments, specialization typically prevails because it allows for optimization within known parameters. In unstable or rapidly changing environments, adaptability prevails because specialized adaptations can become liabilities when conditions change. He paused, allowing the students to absorb this perspective. The Council's concern stemmed from recognizing that the introduction of humans to galactic society represents a significant environmental change, one that could potentially favor adaptability over specialization if not carefully managed. Salahir turned his attention to the blue section of the audience, where Uhari sat with several senior faculty members who had joined the lecture. Finally, let us address the cognitive dimension. Uhari, you concluded yesterday that human neural architecture is insufficient for advanced intellectual functions by cryonarian standards. Have you revised your assessment after further research? Uhari rose, his expression revealing the intellectual excitement that blues often displayed when confronting a challenging problem. I have, Professor. My initial assessment focused on quantitative neural metrics, connection density, processing speed, memory capacity. By these measures, humans indeed fall short of blue capabilities. However, I failed to account for qualitative differences in neural organization. He gestured to the hologram, which Salahir updated to show comparative brain scans. Human cognition appears to prioritize associative processing over linear computation. Their neural networks excel at identifying patterns across seemingly unrelated domains, generating what they term creative insights. While a blue can process more information more accurately, humans demonstrate superior ability to synthesize disparate information into novel frameworks. The hologram displayed examples of human scientific breakthroughs, alongside artistic innovations, showing the conceptual similarities between them. Most intriguingly, Uhari continued, humans appear to use emotional states as computational resources, rather than as interruptions to rational thought. Where blues compartmentalize emotion to maintain cognitive clarity, humans integrate emotional responses into their decision-making processes, particularly when dealing with complex systems with incomplete information. Salahir nodded, pleased with Uhari's insights. The Council noted this integrative cognition with particular interest. Human emotional processing, while primitive compared to yellow capabilities, serves a different function in their cognitive architecture. It acts as a heuristic system that allows for rapid assessment of complex situations without complete data, what humans call intuition or gut feeling. A senior Blue faculty member interrupted, his tone skeptical. Surely such emotionally contaminated cognition would lead to systematic errors and biases. It does, Salahir confirmed. Human cognition is riddled with documented biases and logical fallacies. Yet, despite these apparent flaws, humans have repeatedly solved problems that stumped more logically rigorous approaches. Their cognitive errors appear to be features rather than bugs, sacrificing consistency and accuracy for speed and innovation when facing novel challenges. The hologram shifted to show the rapid advancement of human science compared to other species at similar technological stages. Where most species progress through scientific paradigms in a linear fashion, humans frequently make intuitive leaps that bypass intermediate steps. These leaps often emerge from individuals operating outside established methodologies or combining insights from disparate fields. Uhari's expression reflected deep contemplation. So, the true danger the Council perceived was not in human cognitive capacity per se, but in how their cognitive approach might disrupt established knowledge systems. Precisely, Salahir confirmed. The galactic academic community has achieved remarkable progress through specialized research disciplines, with clear methodological boundaries. Human integrative cognition threatens to blur those boundaries in unpredictable ways. He deactivated the hologram, facing his students directly. We have now examined the three primary dimensions of human biology that led to the Council's weapon classification: their physical adaptability, despite inferior strength, their social cohesion despite limited empathic abilities, and their cognitive innovation despite neural constraints. Salahir paused, ensuring he had everyone's attention for his next point. But the classification ultimately rested on a more fundamental concern: the recognition that humans represent an evolutionary strategy our galaxy has not previously encountered at an advanced technological stage. Most spacefaring species achieve their status through specialization, optimizing specific biological advantages. Humans achieved it through generalization, maintaining adequate capabilities across multiple domains while preserving extraordinary adaptability. The lecture hall had fallen completely silent, even the skeptical faculty members now fully engaged with Salahir's perspective. The question before us is not whether human biology constitutes a weapon. The Council has made that determination based on thorough analysis. The question is how we respond to the introduction of this new evolutionary strategy into our galactic community. Zahir stood again, his powerful frame commanding attention. Professor, you've convinced me that humans possess capabilities our red caste lacks, but you've also shown that we possess capabilities they lack. Doesn't this suggest that cooperation would be more advantageous than conflict? Before Salahir could respond, Mihara rose as well. I concur from a yellow perspective. If humans can form social bonds through cultural mechanisms that transcend the limitations of empathic resonance, they could potentially bridge gaps between species whose neural architectures are too different for direct empathic connection. Uhari joined his classmates. And from a blue perspective, human integrative cognition could complement our specialized intelligence. Where we excel at deepening knowledge within established paradigms, they excel at connecting across paradigms to generate new ones. Salahir looked at his three student representatives with profound satisfaction. You begin to understand why I find this classification so fascinating. What the Council identified as a potential weapon, I see as a potential catalyst, a biological system that could transform galactic civilization not through destruction, but through integration. He reactivated the hologram one final time, showing a speculative model of galactic development with and without human participation. A weapon, after all, is simply a tool with the capacity to change existing structures. The Council's classification was technically correct, but perhaps too limited in its vision. Human biology does indeed have the capacity to fundamentally alter the existing order of galactic civilization, not necessarily through conflict, but through a form of evolutionary disruption that could ultimately strengthen rather than weaken our collective future. The bell chimed, signaling the end of the extended lecture period. This time, students lingered even longer, breaking into animated discussion groups that, Salahir noted with satisfaction, increasingly ignored traditional caste boundaries. As the hall finally began to empty, Salahir noticed that Zahir, Mihara, and Uhari had formed a discussion circle with students from all three castes, a spontaneous integration that mirrored the very principles he had been describing. He gathered his materials, feeling a sense of cautious optimism. The classification of human biology as a weapon had sent shockwaves through the academic community. But perhaps those shockwaves would ultimately break down barriers rather than reinforce them. Outside the lecture hall, the twin moons of Cryonar cast their light across the university grounds. Students moved between buildings, still segregated largely by caste, but with notable exceptions. Small, mixed groups engaged in animated conversation, their different colored skin tones creating a visual metaphor for the integration Salahir envisioned. In his private office, Professor Salahir reviewed his notes for the final lecture in the series. The response to his first two sessions had exceeded his expectations, drawing attention from across the university and even generating discussion in governmental circles. His approach to human biology, focusing on integration rather than isolation, had clearly struck a chord with many cryonarians. A soft chime announced visitors. The door slid open to reveal Zahir, Mihara, and Uhari, now apparently comfortable in each other's company despite their caste differences. "Professor," Zahir began, "we've been continuing our research on human biology and have discovered something we believe is relevant to tomorrow's lecture." Salahir gestured for them to continue, intrigued by this unprecedented cross-caste collaboration. Mihara spoke next, her yellow sensitivity to social dynamics evident in her carefully chosen words. "We've been examining historical first contact scenarios involving humans and other species. A pattern emerged that wasn't highlighted in the Council's classification report." Uhari completed the thought, displaying the analytical precision typical of blues. In 76.4% of documented cases, initial contact resulted in mutually beneficial outcomes, despite significant biological and cultural differences between humans and the contacted species. Salahir leaned forward, genuinely surprised by this statistic. That contradicts the Council's risk assessment, which projected beneficial outcomes in only 23.7% of future contact scenarios. "Exactly," Zahir confirmed. "We believe the Council's projection was based on applying standard diplomatic models to human behavior, models that fail to account for their unique adaptability." Mihara nodded in agreement. "Traditional diplomatic theory assumes that species act primarily to advance their own interests, based on fixed biological imperatives. But humans appear to define their interests differently. They value diversity and novelty in ways our models don't capture. They seek out difference rather than avoiding it," Uhari added. "Where most species establish contact to fulfill specific resource needs or strategic objectives, humans often initiate contact simply to experience new perspectives." Salahir considered this insight carefully. "You're suggesting that the very adaptability that makes humans potentially dangerous also makes them uniquely suited for first contact scenarios?" "More than that," Zahir replied, with unusual enthusiasm for a red discussing theoretical concepts. "We believe their classification as a weapon might actually impede galactic security rather than enhance it." Mihara elaborated, Her empathic abilities clearly engaged as she articulated this controversial position. By treating humans as a threat requiring containment, we risk triggering the very defensive adaptations that make them dangerous. But by engaging them as partners in galactic development, we could potentially direct their adaptability toward mutual benefit. Uhari produced a data crystal containing their research. We've compiled evidence suggesting that human adaptability functions most constructively when they perceive themselves as part of a larger community with shared objectives. Their most destructive historical periods occurred when they perceived themselves as isolated or threatened. Salahir accepted the crystal, deeply impressed by the students' initiative and insight. You've anticipated the direction of my final lecture. The Council's classification focuses on potential threats, but overlooks potential opportunities. He activated his desk display, quickly scanning their compiled research. The quality and integration of perspectives from all three castes was remarkable. Zahir's analysis of human conflict patterns, Mihara's assessment of their diplomatic psychology, and Uhari's synthesis of historical outcomes formed a compelling case for a revised approach to human interaction. This work deserves wider attention, Salahir decided. With your permission, I would like to incorporate your findings into tomorrow's lecture and acknowledge your contribution. The three students exchanged glances, clearly pleased, but also somewhat surprised by this recognition from a respected professor. There is another matter, Salahir continued, making a decision that had been forming in his mind throughout the lecture series. The Interspecies Contact Division has requested academic representatives to participate in the upcoming diplomatic mission to the human colony on Proxima Centauri b. Based on your work, I believe you three would be ideal candidates for this mission. The students' reactions reflected their castes. Zahir's posture straightened, with the physical readiness typical of Reds facing a challenge. Mihara's expression shifted through a complex sequence of emotional responses before settling on resolved excitement. Uhari's cranial bioluminescence increased as his mind rapidly processed the implications of this opportunity. It would be the first mixed-caste diplomatic team in Cryonarian history, Salahir noted. A fitting approach to a species that integrates physical, social, and cognitive adaptability. We would be honored, Professor. Zahir spoke for the group, receiving nods of agreement from his companions. As the students departed to prepare for the final lecture and potentially their new diplomatic roles, Salahir turned his attention to their research data. Their analysis had identified something the Council had missed: the reciprocal nature of human adaptability. Just as humans influenced the environments they encountered, those environments influenced human development. This suggested a promising approach to human integration into galactic society, rather than attempting to contain their disruptive potential. Perhaps the more effective strategy was to engage with it, channeling their adaptability toward constructive, rather than destructive outcomes. The following day, the lecture hall was filled beyond capacity. Word of Salahir's controversial perspective on human biology had spread throughout the university and beyond. Senior government officials occupied reserved seats in the front row, while overflow viewers watched via holographic projection in adjacent halls. Salahir began by acknowledging the extraordinary interest in the topic. The classification of human biology as a weapon has generated understandable concern throughout our society. Today, we will examine the implications of this classification, not just for academic understanding but for the future of interspecies relations. He activated the holographic display, showing the official Galactic Council classification document alongside the research compiled by Zahir, Mihara, and Uhari. I want to begin by acknowledging the exceptional work of three students who have approached this topic from an integrated perspective, rather than through the lens of a single caste. He gestured toward Zahir, Mihara, and Uhari, who sat together in the front row. Their research has informed and enhanced my own understanding of human biological potential. Murmurs spread through the audience at this unusual recognition of cross-caste collaboration. The government representatives leaned forward with increased interest. In our previous sessions, we established that human biology combines physical adaptability, social cohesion, and cognitive innovation in ways that transcend our specialized caste system. Today, we will address the most critical question. Does this combination necessarily constitute a threat to galactic stability? Salahir displayed a series of historical scenarios involving human contact with other species, drawing heavily from the students' research. The Council's classification was based on a theoretical model that assumed fixed biological imperatives would guide human behavior in interspecies interactions. However, empirical evidence suggests a different pattern. He highlighted specific case studies from the display. When approached with openness rather than suspicion, humans consistently demonstrate a preference for cooperative integration over competitive displacement. One of the government officials raised a hand, a gesture of such authority that Salahir immediately acknowledged it. Professor Salahir, are you suggesting that the Galactic Council's assessment was flawed? The official's tone carried the weight of potential diplomatic consequences. Not flawed, Counselor. Incomplete. Salahir replied carefully. The Council correctly identified the disruptive potential of human biology. Where their analysis fell short was in recognizing that this disruption could be channeled constructively through appropriate engagement strategies. He shifted the display to show the remarkable variety of human social organizations that had emerged over their relatively brief evolutionary history. Humans possess what they call cultural plasticity, the ability to rapidly develop new social structures, values, and behaviors in response to environmental changes. This plasticity extends to their interactions with other species. The display shifted again, showing the integration of humans into existing interspecies communities on the galactic frontier. In these frontier zones, humans have consistently adapted their behaviors to accommodate the biological and cultural requirements of their non-human neighbors. Rather than imposing human norms, they frequently adopt hybrid practices that incorporate elements from multiple species. Another official spoke up. But doesn't this adaptability pose its own risks? If humans can so readily absorb and modify cultural elements from other species, couldn't they eventually subsume those cultures entirely? A legitimate concern, Salahir acknowledged. However, human cultural plasticity appears to value diversity rather than homogeneity. Throughout their history, humans have preserved cultural distinctions even while developing overarching frameworks for cooperation. He gestured toward Mihara, inviting her to elaborate on this point. The yellow student rose gracefully, her empathic abilities evident in how she modulated her voice and posture to put the officials at ease. Our research indicates that humans experience what they call cultural curiosity, an intrinsic desire to encounter and understand different ways of being. Unlike species that seek to minimize cognitive dissonance by enforcing cultural uniformity, humans appear to derive satisfaction from navigating cultural differences. Zahir added his perspective without prompting, a breach of traditional protocol that nonetheless seemed appropriate in this context. From a red security assessment, this trait could be strategically advantageous. Rather than attempting to suppress human adaptability through isolation, which historical evidence suggests would likely fail, we could direct it toward constructive integration through engaged partnership. Uhari completed the student's presentation, his enlarged cranium pulsing slightly with the intensity of his cognitive processes. The mathematical models developed from our research suggest that human integration would most likely accelerate technological and social innovation throughout the galaxy, while actually decreasing the probability of large-scale conflicts. Their ability to synthesize diverse perspectives appears to generate novel solutions to long-standing problems. Salahir watched with pride as his students presented their findings with confidence and clarity. The fact that they spoke in turn, each contributing from their caste's perspective, while supporting a unified conclusion, embodied the very integration they were advocating. When they had finished, Salahir addressed the assembled audience again. The weapon classification of human biology is technically accurate, but potentially misleading. A weapon, after all, is simply a tool with the capacity to change existing structures. The critical question is not whether humans can change galactic civilization. They undoubtedly can. But how we engage with that change. He displayed a final set of projections, showing two potential futures. One, in which humans were contained and isolated, leading to eventual conflict as their expansion inevitably continued. And another, in which human adaptability was channeled through cooperative institutions, leading to accelerated development and stability. The Galactic Council has identified a legitimate concern. Human biology does indeed represent an unprecedented combination of traits that could disrupt our carefully balanced civilization. But the appropriate response to this disruption is not fear and isolation, but engagement and integration. Salahir turned to address the government officials directly. I respectfully submit that Cryonar has a unique opportunity to lead this engagement. Our three-caste society has already demonstrated that biological specialization and cooperation are not mutually exclusive. We could serve as the ideal intermediaries between humans and the more rigidly specialized species of our sector. The lead official nodded thoughtfully, then rose to address the assembly. Professor Salahir, your perspective on this matter is both provocative and compelling. The Council of Castes will need to consider these implications carefully before determining Cryonar's official position on human integration. The official turned to Zahir, Mihara, and Uhari. Your work represents an unprecedented collaboration across caste boundaries. The Council would be interested in a more detailed presentation of your findings at the next Interstellar Policy session. The students accepted this extraordinary invitation with appropriate formality, though Salahir could detect their barely contained excitement. As the official sat down, Salahir delivered his concluding remarks. The classification of human biology as a weapon reflects a legitimate concern about their disruptive potential. But perhaps what our galaxy needs at this stage in its development is precisely this kind of disruption. Not to destroy what we have built, but to help us build something greater. The lecture concluded to thoughtful silence rather than applause, a sign, in Cryonarian culture, of profound impact. As students and officials filed out of the hall, engaged in intense discussion across traditional caste boundaries, Salahir knew that something significant had been set in motion. The twin moons of Cryonar shone through the transparent dome, casting three distinct colors of light across the departing audience: red, yellow, and blue, blending at their edges to create new hues. It seemed a fitting metaphor for the future Salahir envisioned, not the replacement of specialization with adaptation, but their integration into something more remarkable than either could achieve alone. Later that evening, in the quiet of his office, Salahir received an official communication from the Council of Castes. The diplomatic mission to the human colony had been approved, with Zahir, Mihara, and Uhari confirmed as the academic representatives. More surprisingly, Salahir himself had been appointed as mission leader, an extraordinary recognition of his expertise and vision. As he prepared for the challenges ahead, Salahir reflected on the irony of the situation. The classification of human biology as a weapon had been intended to protect galactic civilization from disruption. Yet that very classification had already begun to disrupt Cryonarian society in potentially beneficial ways, breaking down barriers between castes and opening new possibilities for cooperation. Perhaps the true power of human biology lay not in any specific adaptation, but in their capacity to inspire adaptation in others, to serve as catalysts for change in even the most stable systems. If so, then the Council's classification was both correct and profoundly limited. Human biology was indeed a weapon, but one that might ultimately strengthen, rather than weaken, the galactic community it had been expected to threaten. The future remained uncertain, as it always did when new evolutionary strategies encountered established ones. But Salahir faced that uncertainty with optimism, confident that the integration of specialization and adaptability offered the best path forward for all species involved. As the last light of the setting moons faded from his office, Salahir began drafting his first communication to the human representatives on Proxima Centauri b. The message was simple, but profound. Your biology has been classified as a weapon. We believe it may also be our greatest opportunity. Let us discover together what we might become.